Welcome to another edition of the Safeopedia podcast. It's really great. We've got some special episodes coming up for everybody because we're going to be focusing on the EHS Congress. That's happening in Berlin, September the 13th and 14th, 2022. And today we have one of the speakers that are going to be speaking at the conference with us. We have Klaus Rose, and he is the Vice President of EH&S Renewable at GE. Welcome, Klaus.
Thanks, Tamara. Appreciate it. And thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. You know, it's interesting to get to speak to individuals who have gotten to a vice president level in EHS. I know a lot of us, you know, we'd like to get there, but we're kind of not sure about that career path. So maybe you could share with us a little bit about how did you get into the field of occupational health and safety and your journey to your VP presidency at GE?
I can definitely. So it's very simple. I got lucky. I had never envisioned that I would get into the field of occupational health and safety. That was never on my agenda. So I spent 20 years in the Danish Armed Forces as a career officer. But due to a lot of circumstances with stations in other countries, I kind of decided that I needed to try something else. So I had a background in business management. So I decided to do my own business. And I did that for about 4 years. And then I met an individual that kind of asked a simple question whether I could be interested in kind of starting on this journey on EHS, because he needed somebody who understood leadership and could drive change, but could build up an organization. And that was kind of how it all started, and that's literally how I got into EHS. So it was a coincidence in so many ways. And then you could ask me whether I ever regretted that, and the answer to that is no. It's been a blast. It's been an interesting ride to get where I am today, and I've learned a lot along the way. You're on mute, Tamara.
So you mentioned that you started in the armed forces,
yep.
Right? Doing your service there. And then afterwards, when you wanted to try something else, you started your own business, managing your own business for about 4 years. And then that's
Yep.
when somebody came and said to you, hey, would you like to try this area of EHS? And so you were saying there that one of the things that the person came to you about was building leadership. Maybe you could share a little bit about that for our audience.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned while I was in the armed forces was really, you have to be an extremely good leader. And in particular, when you want to operate in the field of environment, health, and safety. And the reason for that is very simple. So if I look at me as an individual, in a financial term, I'm just an overhead cost allocation. I don't provide any bottom line to the business, not at all. So I need to be very mindful of that. And the only way of doing that is understanding how you can drive value. Because the only thing I can drive is value. And then the discussion is not going to be on whether I'm an overhead cost allocation or not. So you have to understand how you leverage that. And you do that by having a very clear understanding of how people act, how people engage, how you engage with other people, regardless of what level they're at. And I think that's part of the success story as well. If you want to get to those roles, is that you need to be good at this. Because you can have a very good EHS background, but that's not going to get you there. And I'm the best example. I had no EHS background, so I had to take that along the way. But that's not where I kind of see myself having made a difference. That's based on what I learned when I was in the armed forces.
So what you're saying is that our human resources, otherwise known as employees, are actually overhead costs in the business.
Yes.
So in order to present ourselves in a light that we're a valuable asset, you really need to understand, how are you bringing value to the business? Did I get that right so far?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. Because
And
it's kind of like, you have to look at it. It's kind of like a customer relationship, right? If I don't provide any value to a customer, they're going to go somewhere else. And that's exactly the point. You have to be very vigilant about that, and you have to be very self-critical. Am I really driving a behavior that is suitable for my customer? And if the answer to that is no, you need to kind of change direction.
so how does that translate into the world of health and safety? Maybe you can help our audience understand that a little bit.
So it translates a lot, because I think there are two things that people need to remind themselves of. People don't go to work with the intent of getting injured. That's kind of the baseline. So you have to really understand that. So people do make mistakes. That's the other parameter. You and I make mistakes 6.5, 7 an hour. That's the average. That is scientifically proven. So you cannot change that, regardless how much you try. So the only thing you can do is realizing that people will make mistakes. Our job task is to make sure that the outcome of that does not become, severe or fatal. And that's where we can help, and that's where we can provide a lot of benefits. But that also means that you need to have a very different discussion with your leaders. You need to have a very different conversation, because if it's just about telling, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to really engage, and you have to be the best sales representative that you can imagine. So one of the key things that you really need to be good at is selling. If you are not good at selling, you're not going to get anywhere, because people will very quickly move on. So we have little to offer them.
So you discussed that, you shared that you have to have a different discussion with leaders.
Yep.
Right. And you also brought up that it's very important to be engaging as well as selling. Well, what about the front line? What about the discussions that you have with them? Because I'm asking this because a lot of individuals that I have come across in my career path in safety come at it from a compliance and regulatory view. Now, Klaus, I come from a social work background. So of course I bring a different style and hat to the table. So maybe we could, because I love what you're saying about the engaging and selling. So maybe we could open that discussion up a little bit.
Okay. So I'll kind of go back to my military career, because you can ask yourself one very simple question. How many EHS professionals do you have in an armed grouping of people? You have 0. Why? Because everybody knows that it's really crucial, because if you don't do this right, you're probably going to end up dead. So people have an interest in making sure that they do things by the book. But doing things by the book, and that's another very important learning for anybody who wants to kind of make a career, is you need to make yourself understood at the frontline level. And I'll take my own example. I've been driving main battle tanks for many, many years. They're a 4-man on a Western military tank. Regardless whether you're a captain, lieutenant colonel, you are part of a 4-man crew. So I couldn't tell the guys on the tank, do you know what, I'm going to do some office work. It didn't work, because they're going to be 1 man short. So you needed to do maintenance. You needed to be dirty. You needed to do all of the crappy work. Why? Because you were part of a 4-man team. So what I kind of put into my teams in the world I'm in right now is, I always tell them, you cannot become a burden to the front line. So you need to have the same understanding. You need to have the same skill set as our technicians, because if you don't, you're not going to be able to have a conversation. You're just going to be seen as a burden. And then the compliance topic, that just slides apart, because what happens is you now start to get a different flavor of how things are being done, because I'm going to come back to one of the prerequisites. People don't go to work with the intent of getting injured. So people are trying their best to do a job. And our job is to understand why they do certain things, because we may have gotten it all wrong and we need to listen to them. So you really have to engage with your frontline to make sure that you understand how to help. Otherwise, you're just going to be seen again in their eyes as just an annoying person, just talking about compliance, being policeman instead of being actual help, because it comes back to my financial point. Then they have a good argument just pointing fingers and say, yeah, but you just don't overhead cost allocation. What do you bring? What kind of value do you bring to the table? And their argument is valid, which would be nothing. So you really need to invest in yourself. And that's how you make it in an organization to the levels that I'm at, is you constantly need to challenge yourself to get more knowledge, more involvement. You need to get engaged in a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with EHS, but has a lot to do with a lot of other stuff. So you kind of need to make yourself visible. And by doing that, you then become a valuable asset to a company.
Yeah, no, I love what you're bringing to the table. What is your value to the team and to the company? Being a valuable asset, understanding the why behind why the team is chosen to do things a certain way is so critical, and really getting in there and engaging with them and understanding that world. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to change gears a little bit and kind of find out, a little bit under the hood about who you are and what keeps you going. So if you could share with us, like, what is your most passion area in health and safety and what you do?
I wouldn't point out one specific item and say that's going to be my passion, but my underlying passion is I always challenge myself. I hate mainstream. I hate it for a variety of reasons, because it makes people complacent. And if you really want to make a change, you have to go places where nobody else have gone before you. And that's really what keeps me going. I'm not saying that it's all about making constant change, but you need to have a vision that, goes out in the future where you don't have an answer how to get there. It's okay. But that's really what keeps me driving. If I kind of get stuck in an organization that really doesn't want to evolve, I'm going to be out of there very quickly. And again, it comes back to the way that was brought up in the armed forces, is you kind of got at a point in your career where you got skilled. And then somebody high up came to you and said, do you know what, Klaus, now is the time for you to move on. And then you had to start all over again. And I really tried to also install that in my own people. And I've hired a lot of people, and I also have a lot of people on my team right now that has no official EHS background. They have it now because that was one of the criteria. But I really try to engage people that comes from an angle to look at things differently. Because it's really simple, and people will probably hate me for saying that, but becoming an EHS professional is simple. There are trainings out there that people can go to. You can get it, but I can't change the underlying behavior that people have. You and I are brought up in different sort of ways, and while you're in the age between 5 and 9, that's really where you kind of generate the person that you're going to be in the future. The rest is just learning along the way. So you kind of create certain skill sets that are going to help you along the way.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying, especially the part about challenging yourself, because when those that you work with see you challenging yourself, that encourage them to challenge themselves, right? And so then that really ignites. I've seen that happen where I work, where that really ignites, where even workers who have done the job for 42 years, when there's that opportunity to try new things, you know, your vision is like bring new ideas and ways of doing things that other people haven't tried, people get excited about that. And so I think that's really an important thing as a leader to bring to the table. I know that, you know, one of the most important assets that we have as health and safety professionals are all the individuals that are in the workforce, because like there's one of us and many of them. So if we can gift them with, you know, health and safety is actually about helping to keep the environment safe for one another by mitigating and eliminating risks. And then you have them involved in new ideas of how to do that. That can be a really incredible way of not just challenging yourself as a health and safety professional, but also engaging your team and having them bring ideas to you. So I wanted to ask, you know, your success, you're the VP of EHS at EG. It's a huge company. And so it'd be kind of interesting to hear, you know, what are some of the recommendations that you might share from all your wealth of experience getting to where you are to help our listeners, other health and safety professionals, with some of their biggest challenges. And I'll just have to be quite upfront with you. You know, their biggest challenge is what they're saying is getting people like yourself, Klaus, senior management, to buy into the safety initiatives that they're trying to implement, as well as those that they're working on site. So what is some of the recommendations and insights you can give our audience to help with that?
Baseline for me is always be true to yourself. You know, don't change the way that you act as an individual, because then people struggle to understand, who am I dealing with? You know, be very, very vigilant about being the same regardless of whatever situation you get into. That's the starting point. Then the next point is, and it comes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, it's really about, how do I ensure that I understand exactly what people are up against? So let's just take the middle managers, what they're up against. They're up against a ton of pressure from down below and a ton of pressure from above. And there was one of my colleagues that framed that feeling in a very interesting way. So he called it the bullshit smog layer, which kind of nailed it to me and say, okay, I get that. That's kind of, they are the filtering of, you know, the bullshit going up and the bullshit going down. They're in a very tough spot. And we have to remember, what are they being measured at? They're being measured at delivery, cost, cash. Those are the things that are being measured on them. Are they getting measured on EHS? No, they're not. They only get measured if they screw up. So it is really simple for them to just focus where they need to focus. So what we need to do is we need to have a conversation where we can help them leverage EHS in the areas where they actually are being measured on. Because if you do a good job on project management, as an example, you save time. Time equals money. That means that if we can help them with tools that can kind of have a different kind of conversation with their employees on how to do things right the first time, that's going to take a lot of pressure off their shoulders. And the more that you do that, the more they're actually going to come back to you and then have a conversation. Then the other part is, you need to engage yourself in training. So even though where I'm at right now, I still do leadership training for the middle managers. You know, I'm not, you know, shy of meeting up with, 15 leaders and then do in our case, Vision Safe for Leaders training, where we talk about, so what are the realities? How can we help? Giving them some insights that can actually help them, and then get the feedback and adjust. But it comes back to you not being afraid of going the extra mile. That's how you engage, and this is how we've actually managed to engage with our middle management.
Oh, thank you for that. So be authentic, be true to yourself in every situation. So there's a consistency of your personality.
Correct.
Which it's easy to say, but it's very interesting that a lot of us do kind of like chameleons change depending on the environment that we're in. So that's a very important point that you bring up, because you're right. When you come into your own as a leader, you kind of have your own values and principles that you measure yourself by for your behaviors. Would you agree or disagree with that?
No, I agree with you, because at the end of the day, regardless of which position you're in, you're just a human being.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we fundamentally have all of the same needs, food, eating, drinking, socializing, it's all the same. So you just got in a certain position for a variety of reasons. It could be luck. It could be that, you're good. It could be the fact that, circumstances kind of led you to it. So there are a number of things that kind of get to that point. But the most important part, if you don't believe to yourself that you're able to do it, then luck is not going to get you there. So you need to really want that in order to get to the next level.
Yeah, it reminds me of Stephen Covey, lead by your principles and your values and beliefs. Correct. And that usually keeps you on course. This is really great advice. And then you also said, understand what people are up against. What are they being measured by?
Yeah.
Right. And then try to think about health and safety, EHS in their world, depending on what they're being measured by. How does that fit in? Have I got that right for our audience?
You're absolutely right. You're right.
Oh. Okay. And then you also said, and I really like this because I think this is one that does fall to the side a lot, and it has to do even with self-development and self-care, is investing in ourselves, engaging in your own learning, development, and training, which goes back to what you were saying about before, challenging oneself.
Yep. Absolutely. You have to constantly develop. You have to constantly strive to get to the next level, because if you just stand still, then you're just going to get bypassed very quickly. And then we come back to the financial discussion. Yeah, I'm just a poor overhead cost allocation. I provide zero value, and then that becomes the conversation instead of what value you bring to the table. So you need to be upfront with that all the time, because you have zero. You have zero time to rest here. You just need to stay ahead of yourself all the time.
No, that's a very good point. Absolutely. And part of self-development is going to conferences and hearing other people speak and networking with people. So I hear that you are going to be at the EHS Congress in September. That's September the 13th and 14th in Berlin.
Correct.
Yeah. So maybe you could share with our audience a little bit about what will you be speaking about at the conference?
So I'll be talking about an AI tool that we have developed. It's called MATE, machine learning technology for EHS. And it was one of those things where everybody kept telling my team, you're never going to make it. And the reason that it's so special is because nobody else have that capability. None. So we are the first one who actually created something that gives people a very simple way of validating data with zero human interface. So it's what in technology terms is called a non-supervised learning model. So we have put zero bias into this, and we have actually come up with a tool that is highly, highly accurate, and it can process, in our case, more than 370,000 records in 2 minutes and 38 seconds. And it can boil it down, and it can learn wherever you want to learn from it, both from line items, from free text, distance between words, correlations, languages. It does not care about whether it's Chinese or whether it's in German. It just translated, and then it comes up with something that you can use to kind of understand what are your risks. But it also talks about we are this is the bias that we put in. The bias is that if we just want to understand lifting operation, lifting operations, that could be a variety of things, right? So if I just focus on lifting operation, I'm just going to be focusing everything that has to do with lifting. But the tool gives you an ability to go one step further and then say, when I talk about lifting, what is the next things related to lifting that is going to come up? But we didn't stop there. We then said, okay, we want to understand what are the underlying causes. What are the actions that are taking place? So if we take lifting, it is crane boom activities with movement as an example. So it kind of boils it down to where I need to focus my effort. And the interesting part is some of the areas that we were focusing on were actually not the right ones. So the tool gave us a different one. And the beauty of this tool is that it's highly, highly accurate. Normally, when you do what's called this NLP model, which is non-supervised learning model, if you get above 30% in your initial run, you're good. We're at 92%. And when you kind of get into the 92, 95% range, then an NLP tool cannot be more accurate. So we've really cracked the code that everybody else was struggling with. And just to give you an indication of the persistence that we had as a team was, we started out talking to IBM and asked them to help. They gave up. They couldn't do it. We went to Amazon. Amazon said we could do it. After about 3 or 4 months, they came back and said, we can do it halfway. I said, well, I'm not happy with halfway. Either we do it as we intended or we don't. And they couldn't do it. So it just tells you how complex it is to do something like that. But we were able to do it. And now we have a tool that is really awesome. And this is again where I think this is where we want to share that learning with others, but also kind of we're talking about that, making that available to others to actually go and buy, because I think it's really amazing. And there could be no secrets in actually securing that people don't get injured. So if we can help others be just as successful with managing their data, why wouldn't we? So that's going to be what I'm going to talk about, our AI tool called Mate.
And so when you're saying managing data, where can that data come from? Can you give some examples of our listeners?
It could, in our case, it's everything that we have related to EHS. It could be stop works, it could be near misses, it could be concern reports, it could be accidents, incidents, it could be from our contractor fleet, it could be from our own employee fleet. But Mate does not care where the data come from. So I can use that for whatever tool I want, because what it does, it processes data and then kind of put it into an algorithm that makes your data look very differently, because no human being can process that amount of data. It's impossible. And we don't understand correlations either. So we need to be extremely sharp if we want to do the same. And let's just come back to what I mentioned earlier. 370,000 records, this system can process in 2 minutes and 38 seconds. No human being has that capability, none.
And so what it does is, like, you've got data coming in from different sources. It might be wearables, it might be reports that people are putting in through an EHS software, right, etc. Might be sensors on machines, etc. It's going in, and the algorithm goes through it through Make, and then it shares with you. You said it gives you an idea and analysis of the data and where to start focusing. So you might be assuming that you need to focus in one area, but it could actually highlight other areas that you weren't on your radar. Am I getting this correct?
Correct. So it looks at it looks at frequency. So how often is a job task being performed?
Yeah.
And what's the severity level?
Okay. Yeah.
So the severity level, the tool kind of learns along the way to look at, okay, there was an accident, or there was an amputation, or there was a machine defect or something like, and then it kind of puts it in. So the areas where you may have the highest number of cases may not be the one that kind of makes it to the top for a variety of reasons. The good thing about it, if you don't trust the data that comes out,
Yeah.
you can pick whatever number of data out of MAID and then look at the data yourself.
Okay.
So it's not that the system is just coming up with rubbish. It kind of says, this is the data that pulled out. If you wanna get to a better understanding, you just click on it and you can download the data, but then you're looking at small chunks of data if you want to verify whether it's actually telling you the truth or not.
Yeah.
So it's not, you're not walking blindsided into this. You're actually having a lot of evidence that you can pull out very simply.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to hearing you talk at EHS Congress in Berlin, EHS Congress in Berlin in September. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is great. Now, before we leave, was there anything that you wanted to leave our audience with?
Well, the most important part is always challenge yourself. That's the key thing to be mindful of, because you can do a lot more than you believe, and even more than your parents believe. So just keep that in mind.
Well, thank you, Klaus. It's been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tamara. Looking forward to seeing that.
And thank you, listeners, for joining us again and choosing to spend your time with us on the Safeopedia podcast. If you're looking for a great event to attend, please check out the EHS Congress that's happening in Berlin, September the 13th to the 14th. And if you're looking for some great health and safety content to share with your network and your team, please check out safeopedia.com. Until next time, stay safe.